Hey Snapchat, yesterday I covered how to build a startup team from the earliest days. Today I want to talk about how to scale your team. So I'm going to talk about building your startup team from A round to B round or B round to C round whenever you're ready to scale. The first thing I tell people is to act your stage. So many people struggle to grow out of the pure startup mentality and to act differently. The best analogy I like to give is from the world of video games. I call it leveling up. What are the things you would do when you get to the next level? As you raise more cash, as you hire more people, as you sign up more customers, I want you to be thoughtful about what are the things you need to do to level up. The very first thing I find is that in the earliest days, since the founders are doing absolutely everything, they get buried in a pile of admin. People see it as a luxury to hire an administrative assistant. What I recommend is hire an admin who doubles as an office manager. But here's why. The most valuable resource in the company should be the founder and CEO. Do you really want that person booking meeting rooms and flights? And do you really want those hours spent against things that are not super high value add that you'd expect from a founder and CEO? So while it made sense while you were a scrappy startup, if you continue to do that and wear it as a badge of honor, you're actually doing your team and your investors a disservice. Number two, amongst the biggest mistakes startups make when they level up is they don't hire a proper VP of finance. It's not uncommon, again, like a badge of honor for the founders to still be doing QuickBook entries. Now here's the problem. If you're spending hours on budgeting spreadsheets, if you're doing forecasting, if you're doing accounting entry, you're not doing higher value tasks. At each of my portfolio companies where I've recommended to bring in a kick-ass VP of finance, not one hasn't hugely thanked me for years. It's simply a rookie mistake to continue trying to do this or to hire someone too junior. Here's what I think you should look for. If you're a VC-backed company that wants to get to the next level and has enough money, I usually recommend hiring an ex-strategy consultant, Bain, BCG, McKinsey, LAK, somebody like that. Now here's why. The accounting side of finance is super easy to find an accountant to manage it for you. What you want is forecasting, budgeting, planning, and you want someone who's going to manage all the other stuff that takes up your time, from office space to HR to legal to hard negotiation. The VP of finance really becomes your true business partner and gives you leverage to level up. So many great ex-strategy consultants want to work at startup, but there's no product role, there's no marketing role, there's no tech role for them. So VP of finance that extends into operations is the best role for them, and so many of these people are superstars. One of the hardest transitions to go from being startup to growth is going from tacit knowledge to process-driven knowledge. When you started the company, you spent time with customers, so you developed a feel for how to overcome sales hurdles and obstacles. You became used to how to talk about the market on business development, on marketing, on fundraising, or with journalists. All of those things that you learned and your founding team learned in the trenches, that's called tacit knowledge. And the advantage of being in a startup is you didn't have to follow the rules. You could zig and zag and change things. I guess people sometimes call it pivoting. Those same skills that benefited you when you were a startup come to harm you as your company tries to scale. When you scale, you need repeatability, you need process, you need alignment, you need to define top-down OKRs, objectives, and key results. You can't be in every meeting with every employee telling them what to do, and you can't be a micromanager. So setting strategic direction, setting objectives and measurements, and delegating allows the company to perform much better without you over-managing every detail of the company. Many of the people who were perfect for you in the startup phase are not the right people to lead process-driven teams. Don't assume a startup person can't do that, but be mindful of it, that the skills are often different, including CEO. The other thing I tell teams as they go from scrappy startup is the scrappiness in the early phase you wear as a badge of honor, but as your company has a bit more scale, has a bit more cash, here's the thing. New employees who are considering joining you or who actually join you sometimes have different perspectives and priorities than you had when you started. They're not sitting on as large amounts of equity. They may not have the same commitment levels as you. You need to begin to prioritize culture over scrappiness. Believe me, I'm not giving you a license to be cavalier about spending money, but it turns out that different things matter to different people over time, and having a great work environment is something that really motivates people when they join and the analogy I like to use is from the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The startup Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that we all have some really basic stuff that we need in terms of, first of all, basic compensation. We need a safe working environment. We need a clean working environment. We need a quiet enough working environment. We also need human interaction if we're people-oriented people, or alone time if we're more of introverts. But over time, if people are going to stay long-term, or you're going to hire a number of employee 100, you need to think about higher up in the stack. Higher in the startup Maslow's hierarchy of needs is I care about career development. I care about working on something that feels good. I care about working somewhere that aligns with my cultural values. And I care about feeling happy every day at work, which is why the office environment and the culture matter, and why you have to invest some money in creating a sense of team and team events, and invest on your staff and interpersonal relationships. Finally, I want to cover how boards change as you scale. In the early days, boards consist usually of founders plus a couple of investors. But as you start to raise more rounds of capital, every subsequent VC wants a seat at the table. You need to find a way to limit the number of VCs on the board. It's a hard negotiation to have, but too many VCs and you'll be hamstrung. Number two, as you start to raise strategic money, you'll end up with board observers. Be very careful with board observers. I usually prefer to say no. The problem with board observers is they're more or less the same as board members, because nothing's ever voted on a board, and here's what happens. The observer comes to the board meeting, they talk just as much as the director, so they end up pushing and controlling the shape of the discussion. What I recommend to strategics is offer to update them quarterly outside of the board meeting, and be open and transparent. You just don't want the administrative burden of not being able to actually run your board meetings. You need to limit the number of management that are actually on the board. I know this will sound strange, but let me explain. In the early days, it's not uncommon for teams to have 3 management on the board. But as your company scales, the founder and CEO may want to talk more openly about the struggles that some team members are having with getting to the next level. As a founder, you can still control some of the board seats without those seats necessarily being filled by management. One way to do this is to bring industry experts on board or independents on the board. If it's a control issue for you, you can be the person who places those members on the board and then potentially ask them to leave the board if you're not happy. Sometimes independents are meant to be a true independent, independent from founders and independent from VCs. Either way, a board too stacked with VCs or too stacked with management is not going to perform as well as having outsiders. And that's it. I hope you got some value out of this. It's really hard to get people to discover you on Snapchat. So if you got any value, please tell a friend. Follow M. Suster.